If you agree that quiet dedication often hides the kind of courage that changes everything, make sure to like and subscribe, because the story you're about to hear will stick with you long after the screen goes dark. I remember the morning like it was etched in metal and shadow. One of those mornings where the air felt heavier than usual, the kind that makes you realize something ordinary is about to become extraordinary. Captain Winters was sitting alone in the early light of the Academy's shooting range, lens cloth in hand, methodically cleaning the glass of her scope, her movements precise, almost meditative. The cadets were milling about behind her, whispering to one another, not noticing that they were witnessing more than just routine maintenance. She didn't flinch at their chatter, didn't even acknowledge it, and for the life of them, none of them could imagine why headquarters had been silent for years about her reputation, her records, her medals hidden away in classified files that seemed almost mythic in their rarity. And then, of course, it happened. The intercom crackled, breaking the hum of the early morning and the soft clinks of metal on metal as she adjusted her scope. Captain Winters, new mission briefing. Report to the ops room immediately. The cadets froze mid-step, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief, because the quiet woman who'd spent hours cleaning her lenses, correcting their stances, and offering quiet guidance was not just any instructor. She was a legend they had never been allowed to fully comprehend until that precise moment, and the broadcast carried an authority and urgency that none of them had ever heard in that calm, familiar building. As she rose, carefully placing her cloth and tools on the bench, her demeanor remained as calm as if she were about to water plants rather than respond to a top-secret mission alert. And it was this combination of serenity and command that drew the cadets' eyes like magnets. I could see them trying to reconcile the gentle teacher they'd watched all semester with the image the intercom had just painted, a woman trusted with missions so critical that only the most elite personnel were ever even briefed. The weight of it was palpable in the air, a tension that made the polished metal of her rifle glint under the fluorescent lights, a subtle signal that everything about this morning was about to pivot. Winter's eyes didn't flicker with pride or impatience, only a quiet focus, as if she had been waiting for this call all along, and everything else, the paperwork, the drills, the routine inspections, had been preparation in disguise. The cadets shuffled closer, unable to hide their curiosity, whispering things like, "Is that really her?" and "I thought she was just an instructor." They didn't realize that Captain Winter's presence had always been a kind of quiet theater of excellence. Each motion controlled, each glance calculated, every word measured to teach without dominating, to lead without needing to. And yet the broadcast, sudden, authoritative, and unmistakably real, shattered the illusion of normalcy and sent a ripple of awe through the group. You could almost see them understanding, in that moment, that greatness often moves silently, that heroism doesn't always announce itself until it's absolutely necessary. Her calm was disarming, but it also screamed of capability. And I could feel the collective heartbeat of the cadets shift as they realized that for the first time, they were witnessing someone whose life had been quietly extraordinary, now stepping into a world they would never fully see. As she picked up her pack, checked her ammunition, and slung her rifle with a fluidity born of decades of practice, one cadet, a younger kid with wide eyes and hands trembling, ventured closer, almost hoping for some crack in her composure. There was none. Instead, Winters gave him the kind of look that communicated both acknowledgement and challenge, a silent message that they were all standing on the threshold of a lesson bigger than drills or classroom lectures. Her footsteps on the concrete echoed through the range, punctuating the sudden silence that had fallen like a fog. Every metallic clang, every soft breath in the room, seemed magnified in the moment as if time had slowed to allow them to drink in the reality of what they were seeing. That the unassuming woman who had been correcting their aim, guiding their posture, and quietly pushing them to be better was someone who commanded respect not through words, but through her presence, her reputation, and the unspoken weight of missions only she could complete. I remember thinking about how the world outside that range had no idea what they were missing, how many people underestimate the quiet ones, the ones who scrub their lenses meticulously, who keep their medals hidden in plain sight, who offer guidance without ever boasting. It was only when headquarters spoke that the magnitude became undeniable. And someone, finally, opened that metaphorical shadow box of her life. Inside were medals the likes of which none of the cadets had ever seen, medals engraved with names, dates, and battles that had never been acknowledged in textbooks, and a letter signed by a general. One of the rarest gestures of recognition, calling her to a mission so secretive it was almost legend. The cadets' jaws went slack as they processed it, whispering to one another in tones of reverence, disbelief, and something close to fear, because suddenly their world, which had seemed so routine, was illuminated by the presence of someone extraordinary moving through it quietly, but with unstoppable force. As Captain Winters left the range, boots clicking in rhythm with her own steady heartbeat, the cadets remained frozen, unsure whether to run after her or simply watch, to take in every small detail. The way she carried herself, the faint glint of sunlight catching her scope, the sharp line of her jaw as if carved from stone. That morning became a lesson they would never forget, one that carried far beyond basic marksmanship or tactical drills. It was a lesson in discipline, quiet courage, and the kind of leadership that doesn't demand recognition, but earns it in the moments that matter most. And I knew then, as I watched the shock and admiration in those young eyes, that some lessons aren't taught in manuals. They're witnessed, felt, and carried forward long after the teacher is gone. By the time I left the range, the hum of the fluorescent lights and the whisper of the early morning wind outside seemed charged with a new understanding. That ordinary appearances are not reliable, that quiet diligence masks tremendous capability, and that sometimes a single moment, a broadcast, a call to action, a single word of authority, can reveal everything a person has always been without them ever needing to speak it aloud. I could see it in the cadets' eyes, in the subtle straightening of their spines, in the newfound respect that hung in the air. They had witnessed something rare, something powerful, and something utterly transformative. Captain Winters had reminded them, without saying a word, that greatness often arrives softly, and that when it does, it leaves a lasting mark, not just on history, but on everyone fortunate enough to witness it. The ops room was colder than the range, sterile and humming with the quiet rhythm of machines, and yet the moment Captain Winters stepped inside, it felt charged, electric, as if the walls themselves recognized the presence of someone who belonged in moments like these. Screens flickered to life, displaying maps, satellite feeds, and encrypted communication channels that the cadets had only glimpsed in textbooks or simulations, and for the first time, they understood that the world they'd been training to protect was far larger, far more dangerous, than anything they had imagined. Winters approached the central console with the same calm precision she'd carried on the range, scanning every screen, every briefing note, every piece of intel with eyes that had learned to see through chaos and deception alike. The voice of headquarters continued over the secure channel, briefing her on a mission that sounded almost impossible, an extraction deep in hostile territory, where failure wasn't an option, and where every decision had the weight of countless lives resting on it. The cadets watched from the observation window, pressed close against the glass, silent and wide-eyed, struggling to reconcile the gentle, measured instructor they knew with the commanding figure orchestrating operations that even seasoned officers might hesitate to attempt. Winters' fingers danced across the keyboard, adjusting coordinates, issuing orders, and confirming communications without ever raising her voice. And in every motion, the cadets could see the layers of experience, of strategy honed in the quietest, most intense crucibles, now applied in real time to a mission whose scale none of them had ever faced. The briefing room seemed to shrink around her, the machinery and screens fading into the background, because she was the center of gravity in that room. Every protocol, every plan, every contingency flowing through her with a clarity that made the impossible seem inevitable. As she finalized the mission parameters, one of the cadets, younger than the rest, let out a barely audible breath of awe, and Winters turned to acknowledge him with a single nod, conveying more in that gesture than words ever could. Confidence, calm, and the quiet insistence that he watch, learn, and carry that understanding forward. By the time the briefing ended, it was clear that Winters was more than a teacher or a mentor. She was the embodiment of precision, courage, and leadership that could move mountains or save them, without ever announcing herself to the world. The cadets remained frozen, absorbing every detail of her preparation, from the meticulous checks of her weapon systems to the careful review of every escape route and communication channel. And in their silence, they learned what words could never fully capture. That true mastery lies not in the stories one tells, but in the readiness to act when the moment demands it. As she stepped back from the console, the soft click of her boots on the floor echoed like a heartbeat, a steady reminder that the calm before action is just as essential as the action itself, and that witnessing such composed competence is a rare education in itself. They had watched her move through the most critical mission briefing of her career without a hint of hesitation, without a single flinch, and the lesson etched into their minds was indelible, that the quiet ones, the unassuming, the understated, often carry the weight of worlds on shoulders that appear fragile only until the moment comes to prove otherwise. The cadets left the observation room with a mixture of reverence and disbelief, their earlier notions of leadership shattered and remade, because Captain Winters had demonstrated that authority is earned silently, through expertise, experience, and the kind of calm decisiveness that can turn chaos into order. And as she walked past them, collecting her gear, checking her pack one last time, they realized something profound, that in the quiet preparation, the meticulous attention to detail, and the serene focus that had seemed mundane, the seeds of extraordinary action were planted, ready to bloom at the exact moment the world demanded it. The convoy waited outside, engines humming softly under the pre-dawn sky, and Captain Winters moved toward it with the same calm that had defined every moment since the broadcast, every step measured, every motion deliberate, as if the air itself bent around her focus. The cadets, now lingering at the edge of the compound, could only watch, breath caught somewhere between awe and disbelief, as she checked her pack, adjusted her rifle, and scanned the horizon with eyes that had already seen more than most would in a lifetime. The mission ahead was dangerous, classified, and far beyond anything the cadets could have imagined tackling, and yet she carried it with an unshakable serenity, a quiet confidence that transformed fear into respect. As the convoy rolled out, Winters gave a single, almost imperceptible nod to the young cadets, and in that gesture, they felt both reassurance and challenge, an unspoken lesson that courage is measured not by words, but by readiness, precision, and the willingness to act when the world demands it. They followed at a distance, their hearts pounding, as she moved through terrain that would have frozen others in hesitation, adjusting plans mid-route, communicating with a calm authority that belied the chaos that might have engulfed anyone else. Every calculated step, every decision, every signal she sent and received was a masterclass in leadership, strategy, and resolve, and the cadets, though far from the front lines, absorbed it all like sponges, realizing that heroism was as much in the preparation as it was in the execution. By the time the mission site came into view, a remote location shrouded in tension and danger, Winters was already coordinating the team, issuing commands with a quiet clarity that left no room for doubt, no space for hesitation, only action. The cadets watched, hearts racing, as she moved with a lethal grace, assessing threats, securing perimeters, and guiding the operation with a presence that turned the impossible into the inevitable. And when the first obstacles arose, the kind that would have thrown a less experienced officer into panic, Winters' calm never wavered. Her eyes, trained to anticipate, calculated, and adapt, swept across the scene, finding solutions before problems fully manifested. In that moment, the cadets' understanding of her, of what they had thought they knew, shifted entirely. This was not a teacher simply instructing. This was a living testament to the depth of preparation, courage, and quiet heroism that so often goes unseen until it must assert itself. By the time the mission was successfully underway, with objectives secured and threats neutralized through Winters' meticulous command, the cadets stood silently, awestruck, hearts pounding in the realization that they had witnessed not just skill, but the embodiment of courage under pressure. And as she finally stood at the edge of the site, surveying the operation with the same calm focus she had displayed cleaning her scope hours earlier, it became clear to all of them that greatness is often quiet, almost invisible, until it reveals itself in the moments that matter most. The day had begun with whispers behind a training range, with a woman quietly polishing the lens of her scope, and it ended with cadets transformed, their perception of leadership forever altered, having learned that heroism, true heroism, is carried not in words or accolades, but in the calm, precise, unyielding presence of someone ready to act when the world demands it, leaving everyone who witnesses it humbled, inspired, and irrevocably changed.